Okay, we're cruising along. We're on number 9 now. Number 9. Now, we have to be careful when we start multiplying because we know that I is equal to the square root of -1 and I squared is equal to -1. You must memorize these, so come to the test with these memorized, okay? You can dump them as soon as you get in this, the testing center, just write them on top of the paper and that's fine, you'll have them as a reference. So, I have a binomial times a binomial, just like I did before, okay? So I'm gonna treat it just as if they're variables. So I'm gonna say 10 times 10 is 100. And then 10 times -4i would be -40i. And then 4i times 10 is going to be plus 40i. And then last but not least, 4i times -4i is going to be -16i squared. Okay? So now I'm going to look for like terms. Well, I see that these are like terms. A -40 and a +40 will give me 10. Will give me 0. So I'm going to get 100 minus 16i squared. Okay? My last step is very critical. I have to remember that I squared is equal to -1. So I'm going to replace I squared with -1. And I'm going to get 100 plus 16. So my answer will be 116. That's right. So this is just like doing it with variables. It's no different, except for at the end, you have to make sure that you replace I squared with -1. Let's do number 10. Number 10 is a binomial divided by a monomial, okay? And this is one that you have to rationalize the denominator. And rationalizing the denominator means you're not allowed to have radicals or complex numbers in the denominator. So right now I have an I, which I'm not allowed to have in the denominator, 9i. So just like with radicals, when I wanted to rationalize a radical denominator, I'm going to do the same thing here. That when I have a monomial, all I need to do is multiply both sides by I. Because I know that I times I is -1, and therefore it's not going to be an I anymore. But here we go. So I'm going to distribute I times -10 minus 11i. So it's going to be -10i minus 11i squared divided by 9i squared. Okay? And remember, our goal was to get rid of the i's. So you got some i's in the denominator, so we don't want to have i's in the denominator. This is where we're trying to rationalize the denominator, which means no i's allowed. Well, that's okay, because we know I squared is really -1. You can substitute. Okay, so I'm going to do it both places. So I ended up with -10i plus 11 divided by -10. I'm sorry, by -9, sorry. So now this is correct, but I rationalized the denominator, but I have not written it in this complex form of a plus bi. So I'm going to divide each term by the denominator. So I'm going to get -10i divided by -9, and then plus 11 divided by -9. We're going to see what I'm doing. I'm just taking the numerator here and dividing by the denominator. And then I'm taking the numerator, this term here, and dividing it by the denominator. Okay? Got to clean this up, keep cleaning it up. So now what we need to do is we need to clean this up a little bit. So it's going to be 10/9i minus 11/9. And you think, I think I finally have it, but you don't, because you have to have the I second. So it's going to be -11/9 minus, plus 10/9i. And the only reason I'm doing that is I want to have the I in the second term. Now I typed my answer in, and I want to make sure that you see that you need to preview it to make sure that you really have a real and then an imaginary number in that order. It needs to be in this a plus bi format, or it's going to mark it wrong. That's what we call standard complex form. Number 11. This time we want to solve a quadratic. And there are many ways you can do this. I'll show you a couple. So this is one that we can solve by using the square root property. That's one that's very easy. So we know we can solve it by using the square root property. And the way we know that is because we can get that square alone. So when you want to use the square root property, you get the square expression alone. So I added 6 to both sides. That's going to be 250. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 10. All right. Once you get the squared expression alone, you take the square root of both sides. And remember, when you take the square root of a square, you're going to get the radicand. Now, this is the tricky part. The square root of 25 is plus or minus 5. Okay? So this is the part you're going to be careful of. It's going to be plus or minus. So I basically have two equations to solve. G plus 8 is equal to 5, and G plus 8 is equal to negative 5. So G is equal to negative 3, and G is equal to negative 13. Assume you hate square root property, you want to do quadratic formula, which some people really love. I don't, but if you like quadratic formula, it has to be in standard form, which means ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So in this case, I would just distribute this out. This is going to be g squared plus 16g plus 64. And then I would distribute the 10. And it has to be equal to 0. So I'm going to take 244 from both sides, and I'd get 10g squared plus 160g, and then I would use my calculator to figure out what is, okay, we clear this out. So this would be 640 minus 6 minus 244, and I get 390. And I'm showing you this because sometimes people will be like, I love quadratic formula. Can I use it all the time? Well, you cannot use it all the time, but you can rearrange it so that it does have this ax squared plus bx plus c format, and then you can use it, okay? So if you're going to use quadratic formula, you can do that, and you could just say that a is 10, b is 160, and c is 390. So you could say negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So b squared 160, and then a is 10 and c is 390, all over 2a. Okay, and let me just show you on the calculator how to do it because a lot of people do it wrong, so let's just kind of practice that. So if you're going to use the quadratic formula, I suggest that you figure out the discriminant first. And the discriminant, remember, is that radicand part of the radical. So we're going to say 160 squared. Okay, and remember, I'm going to tell you this too, before you do that, I would recommend putting this in parentheses. That way, if you have a negative or a positive, make sure you do it correctly. And then minus 4 times 10 times 390. Oops. So it tells me that my radicand is 10,000. So if I take the square root of 10,000, then I get 100. So it's going to be minus 160. Oops, let me get a better marker than yellow. So minus 160 plus or minus 100 divided by 20. Okay? So I have two answers here. It's going to be minus 120 plus 100, all divided by 20, or negative 160 minus 100 divided by 20. Okay? So I want to make sure you see on the calculator how this works. The biggest mistake I see people make is they do this. They'll say negative 160 plus 100. And then they'll put divided by 20. But this will give you the wrong answer because it thinks that only the 100 is divided by 20. So if you're going to use this method, make sure you put parentheses around the numerator. Okay, now it knows that it's entire numerator divided by 20, and you hit enter and you'll say negative 3. That's the same answer we got earlier, isn't it? Okay, let's do the next one. So I don't use that method. I do this. I'd say negative 160, and then I'd say minus 100. And then I just hit enter, and then I divide that number by the denominator, and it'd be negative 13. So that's for people who love the quadratic formula. Yes, you can use it, but you have to expand it all the way out. So it's a little more work there. So just be careful. And you can always check your answer by putting it back in the original equation, making sure it's true. You have to check both of them. Okay. And then I want to show you one more method for finding these solutions for a quadratic. We really didn't talk about it very much in class, but I thought let me just show it here for people that want to use the calculator. So the calculator tells us the answer. So let me move it over here. So now when you're using the calculator, it has to be equal to 0. So I could rewrite this as 10 times g plus 8 squared. And if I subtracted 244 from both sides, it's going to be minus 250 is equal to 0. Everyone see what I did? I just subtracted 244 from both sides. So it must be equal to 0 before you use this method. But if you're going to use this method, you say y equals, that's that top left button there, and then you type in your equation. So 10, and then I don't have a g, so I'm going to use an x right there. Oops. Plus 8. Now, it has to be equal to 0, okay? My next equation I'm going to write is y2 is equal to 0. So what I'm doing is I'm graphing the function, and then I'm graphing the x-axis, and I'm going to see where they intersect. So if you're going to use this method, you're going to say second graph. I'm writing the button so you know what I'm going to push. Okay? So second graph, and then you're going to hit 5, and then you're going to hit enter, 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 and that's going to give you the intersection. So let's do that one together. So here we go. Second graph. Oh, I gave you the wrong, sorry. Second trace. Sorry. Here we go. Let's try that again. Second trace. Second trace 5. And then you're going to hit enter, enter, enter. And that gives you your first answer, negative 3, 0. That's your first answer on the very bottom, negative 3, 0. That's your solution. So your solution is going to be x is equal to negative 3. That's my answer. Okay, but I know I have two solutions, right? And I don't see the other one, right? So, but I know it's going to be a parabola because we know if it has a square, it's got to be this shape, either that or like this. And you can see on mine, I cannot see the whole thing. So I could either zoom out, zoom, and then out. Make sure you hit enter. Aha, now I'm seeing both shapes. So I can see I have two roots, one here and one here. Okay, so let me just do it again. So I'm going to say second trace 5, enter, enter, enter. And you see it found that first one, that negative 3, but I didn't find my second one. So to find my second one, I'm going to do the exact same thing, second trace 5. But before I hit enter, 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 I'm going to use my little arrow keypad thing that looks like this. Okay, and I'm going to go closer to the one I want. So here we go. Second, trace, 5. Now, I'm going to take my little arrow keypad here, and I'm going to just go left because I wanted to go to the one that was to the left of the one I found. Oh, and there's my little spider. Did you see him walk by me? There's my little spider there, okay? So whenever he's anywhere close to that x-intercept, I'm just going to hit X, enter, enter, enter. And it tells me -13. So that's my second answer, -13. So there's my two answers there. So -3 and -13. So I checked myself on the calculator. Okay, so I can enter those. And remember, when you're entering them into the calculator, into the iMath AS, it says to put multiple solutions, separate with a comma, and do not use any decimal values. I want you to use fractions and simplify any radicals. So here we go. So we're going to say -3 and -13, and that is the answer. Okay? And you don't have to use all those methods. I'm just showing you in case which one you like. So let's try the next one. This one is definitely an easy square root one because it's already isolated. So let's just try it. Okay. So I'm going to say 6h minus 2 squared is equal to -432. Well, it was already isolated, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And my left side becomes 6h minus 2. What does my right side become? What is the square root of -432? Well, that's going to be an I, isn't it? That's going to be an imaginary number. So let's just go ahead and leave it like that for now, and let's solve for h. So I would add 2 to both sides, and I'm going to get 6h is equal to 2 plus square root of -432. And then I want to get h by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 6. Okay? So far, so good. And since I know I'm going to have it in this a plus bi format, I'm going to divide each term in the numerator by the denominator. So it's going to be 2 divided by 6 plus square root of -432 divided by 6. So far, so good. So we know we can simplify the 2/6 as 1/3. If you're having problems with that, I'm going to show you the little cheat method on your calculator. So if you're still struggling with simplifying fractions, you would put in 2 divided by 6 and hit math 1, enter. That gives you the fraction simplified. Unfortunately, it's not so nice and easy over here, though. To get the square root of -432, we're going to have to simplify that radical. So I'm going to say that's going to be 216 and 2, and 2 and 108. I'm just going down. If you can't do it in your head, do it on the calculator. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 2s, and 1, 2, 3 3s. Okay, erase this, give myself a little more room. All right, and I know I have a -1. I'm going to put that over here just by itself. So the -1 we know is going to be the I. So I can just bring him out here for now. Okay. And my last thing that I want to do is I want to see how many groups of 2 I have. So I have 2 2s here, and 2 2s here, and 2 3s here. So I'm going to bring one member of each group out front. So I'm going to have 3 times 2 is 6, times 2 is 12. 12 square root of 3. Okay, and remember there's an I, so 12 square root of 3. And there's already a 6 in our denominator. Okay, so now my last thing is I have to say to myself, wait, 12 divided by 6, I can definitely call that 2. So I'm left with 1/3 plus 2 square root of 3i. Oh my goodness, I just realized I made a big mistake. So whenever I take the square root of both sides in the square for the square root property, I have to make sure that I put a plus or minus. I'm going to put it here, and hopefully this will help you not make the same mistake that I just made. That was a silly mistake. So I'm going to use this sparkly green pen. So let's put this in here. So whenever I take the square root of both sides, I have to make sure on the side with the number, I put a plus or minus. Okay, so that would make this be plus or minus. and plus or minus, and plus or minus. Okay, so don't make the same mistake I just made. So hopefully you won't. Say, don't forget that when you take the square root of both sides, the side with the number has to have a plus or minus. Okay, so I'll have two answers. So when I put them in over here, I would say 1/3 plus 2, and then I have to use my square root again, square root of 3. Okay, and then I'm going to say I. Oh, and I, okay, and then I'm going to say comma, and then 1/3 minus square root of 3I. Now, if you're concerned about is the I underneath the radical or whatever, just put parentheses around it. If it makes you more comfortable, put that around. Parentheses, you can always kind of overuse parentheses. Whoops, I think I accidentally, though, got rid of my 2, didn't I? Okay. I'm just saying if it makes you nervous, kind of look at, always use that little preview because it's helping you see what you're doing as far as you're getting to see. You can see clearly now that is what we want. That's correct. Okay. Number 13. Okay, this is a quadratic. We know there are 3 ways to solve a quadratic: square root property, quadratic formula, or factoring. Now this one here I can clearly see as an easy factoring one. It's just a difference of squares. So it's k minus 5 and k plus 5. So I'll set each factor equal to 0 and I'll solve. Nice easy problem. And I'll get k is equal to 5 and k is equal to -5. And I can check those by putting them into the original problem to make sure it's true. Okay? I also want to show you, you could use the square root property. So it depends on what you like. So if you're a person who likes the square root property, you would get the square by itself, and then you'll take the square root of both sides. This time I'm not going to forget. A is equal to plus or minus 5. Always remember that when you have taken the square root of both sides, you have to do plus or minus the side of the constant, and that would be your answer. Okay? And what about you quadratic formula lovers? Could you use that? Sure, you'd say that A is 1, B, well, B is a number, the coefficient in front of the K by itself with an exponent of 1, so we don't have one of those, so it's going to be 0. And then our C will be -25. You could use your quadratic formula. And then last but not least, let me just demonstrate one more time. If you want to use the calculator, here we go. So you say y equals, you type in x, we don't have a k, squared minus 25, it has to be equal to 0. Then you say second trace, and then 5, and then enter, enter, enter. Oh, I was a little too early in my enter, enter, enter. Okay, let me try that again. Second trace, 5. Well, I'm going too fast for my calculator. Second trace, 5. And then once you see first curve, you're going to hit enter, enter, enter. There you go. It gave you the first one is 5. We want both of them, so I'm going to say second trace 5. I don't want that one anymore. I want to move to the left. I use my left or right arrow keys only. Do not use up and down. Okay, so I just go anywhere near it, right? Just showing that I want the one on the left, and I hit enter, enter, enter. And then it gives me the one on the left. Okay, so I can use any of those methods. It does not matter. It's your choice. Let's try number 14. Number 14 says it's a quadratic. Yay, quadratic. Okay, so I know I could either try factoring it, I could use the quadratic formula, I can use my calculator. Okay, so I'm not going to try, I'm just going to try the quadratic formula. I'm going to try A is 4, B is 1, and C is -4. So I know the quadratic formula. A negative boy couldn't make up his mind if he should go to this really radical party because he was squared He missed out on meeting 4 awesome chicks, and the party was all over by 2 a.m. So that is how you can learn the quadratic formula, or you can sing it, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's the quadratic formula, but you need to have it memorized in your little head. Whenever I'm using the quadratic formula, I write it out, and then I write a second one underneath it, where everywhere there's a variable, I put a parentheses, a set of parentheses, like that. Okay? Now I fill in, I'm going to use a different marker to show you what I mean. Okay, I'm going to see if I can figure this out. B is equal to 1, so I'll put a 1 here. Okay, and B is equal to 1 here. And then A is 4, and C is negative 4. And then A is 4. Okay, so I've replaced everywhere there was a B, I put 1. Everywhere there was an A, I put 4. And everywhere there's a C, I put negative 4. Okay, let's get back to that purple pen. I don't like that yellow, that orange one very much. All right, so now what I always do is I always multiply my radicand, which is the stuff under the radical sign. I would say that's 1. So if I have my calculator, I'm going to go, oh, I'm already there. So I'm going to say 1, oops, somehow I get a parentheses. 1 squared, okay, minus 4 times 4 times negative 4. Okay, that tells me I have 65 under the radical. So I have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 65 over 8. All right. So now I have to simplify this. So the square root of 65 is not simplified. I'm not sure about that one. So I'm going to come over here and make myself a little tree. And if I use the calculator, I can help myself. 65 divided by 5 is 13. Wow, so 65 is simplified. It can't go any farther. And so my answer is what I see here. Or if I want to break it into 2 terms, I can say this is negative 1/8 plus or minus the square root of 65 over 8. So you could enter that in. Remember, on iMath you don't enter it as plus or minus. You enter it as 2 different answers. You'd say negative 1/8 plus square root of 65 over 8. And then negative 1 minus square root of 65 over 8. So I put it over here. And they're showing it as one term, without breaking it down, but it will take both. You could take it either way on that one. The only times you have to do it is when it's A plus BI format. So I'm going to tell you, I would always get in the habit of breaking it down into the 2 terms. Okay. Number 15. We're doing the same thing again. This whole section is solving quadratics. We know 3 methods. Really, at this point, a lot of people are just going to start using the quadratic formula unless they just see it's an easy one to factor. Okay, so we have f squared plus 4f plus 3 is equal to 0. Well, I'm like, wait. Could I factor that? That just looks like maybe one that's really easy to factor. Let me just try. Yeah, that one's an easy one. Because I know that 3f plus 1f will be 4f. So f plus 3 is equal to 0, and f plus 1 is equal to 0. So f is equal to negative 3, and f is equal to negative 1. Okay? Now, make sure when you put them in with a comma. That, okay? Now, you could use the quadratic formula for that one if you wanted to. Not a problem. Or once again, you could use the calculator. Okay, so let me just show you one more last time for fun. So I put it in here as x squared. There is no such thing as an f on here, not easily. So you just say an x instead. It's equal to 0. I always use y2 is equal to 0. You leave that one in there. And then you're going to say second trace 5. 5 is intersect. So we're looking where it intersects with the x-axis. And I'm going to say enter, enter, enter. And it gives me my first one is negative 1. Like that one there. Okay. And then I want to find the other one. Now, I already had zoomed it out. So if I want a standard window, I can say zoom 6, that makes a standard 10 by 10 window. So typically a standard window on your calculator looks like this, 10 by negative 10, positive 10 by negative 10. So if you hit zoom and then 6, it's going to give you that, okay? I said second trace 5, enter, enter, enter. It gave me that first one, that negative 1. I want the second one, so I'm going to say second trace 5, but before I hit enter, 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 I just move it a little closer to the other side. It doesn't have to be on it. And then I hit enter, enter, enter. I'm just telling it, the calculator, which one I want. And it gave me the negative 3. Okay, so I know most people aren't good with windows, but I'm just going to practice you a little bit that a standard window, if we want that 10 by 10 one, is zoom 6. Okay, my calculator got jammed for a second there. I had to reset it a minute ago. So you can always reset it back to that 10 by 10 window. And if you ever want to, you can use zoom and then in and out, just like we do on the computer. Just make sure you hit enter following which one you press. That will make it zoom in and out. Okay. I'm going to stop and I'm going to start a new video.